I will start reading from the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and here I am. Once again, I dropped into Appalachia for Delta selection. In 2006, after I smoked the 18-mile road ruck on our first real day of work, I heard some well-intentioned blowback from some of the other guys who were tapped into the rumor mill. In Delta selection, everything is a secret. Yes, there are clear tasks and training, but nobody tells you how long the tasks are or will be. Even the 18-mile ruck was a best estimate based on my own navigation, and only the cadres know how they evaluate their candidates. According to the rumor mill, they use that first ruck as a baseline to calculate how long each navigation task should take. Meaning, if you go hard, you will eat away at your own margin for error. This time I had that intel going in and I could have played it safe and taken my time. But I was not about to go out among those great men and give a half-assed effort. I went out even harder so I could make sure they saw my very best, and I broke my own course record according to that reliable rumor mill by 9 minutes. Rather than hear it from me, I reached out to one of the guys who was in Delta selection with me, and below is his first hand account of how the ruck went down. Before I can talk about the road march, I have to give a little bit of context in the days leading up to it. Showing up to selection, you have no idea what to expect. Everyone hears stories, but you do not have a complete grasp of what you are about to go through. I remember arriving at an airport waiting for a bus, and everyone was hanging out bullshitting. For many people, it is a reunion of friends that you have seen in years. This is also where you start sizing everyone up. I remember a majority of people talking or relaxing. There was one person who was sitting on his bag, looking intense. That person, I would later find out, was David Goggins. You could tell right from the start he would be one of the guys at the end. Being a runner, I recognized him but didn't really put it all together until after the first few days. There are several events that you have to do just to start the course. One of those is the road march. Without getting into specific distances, I knew it was going to be fairly far but was comfortable with running a majority of it. Coming into selection, I had been in special forces for a majority of my career, and it was rare when someone finished before me in a road march. I was comfortable with a ruck on my back. When we started, it was a little cold and very dark, and as we took off, I was where I was most comfortable out front. Within the first quarter mile, a guy blew by me. I thought to myself, no way he could keep that pace. But I could see the light on his headlamp continue to pull away. I figured I would see him in a few miles after the course crushed him. This particular road march course has a reputation of being brutal. There was one hill that, as I was going up, I could almost reach out in front of me and touch the ground. It was that steep. At this point, there was only one guy in front of me, and I saw footprints that were twice as long as my stride length. I was in awe. My exact thought was, this is the craziest shit I have seen. That dude ran up this hill. Throughout the next couple of hours, I was expecting to come around a corner and find him laid up on the side of the road, but that never happened. Once finished, I was laying out my gear and I saw David hanging out. He had been done for quite a while. Though selection is an individual event, he was the first to give a high five and say, "Nice work." That performance left an impression beyond the guys in my selection class. I heard recently from Hawk, another SEAL, that some army guys he worked with on deployment were still talking about that ruck almost like it's an urban legend. From there, I continued to smash through Delta selection at or near the top of the class. My land navigation skills were better than they had ever been, but that doesn't mean it was easy. Roads were off limits, there were no flat ground, and for days we bushwhacked up and down steep slopes in below freezing temperatures, taking waypoints, reading maps, and the countless peaks, ridges, and draws that all looked the same. We moved through thick brush and deep snow banks, splashed through icy creeks, and slalomed the winter skeletons of towering trees. It was painful, challenging, and fucking beautiful, and I was mocking it, mashing every test they could conjure. On the second to last day of Delta selection, I hit my first 4 points as fast as usual. Most days there were 5 waypoints to hit in total. So when I got my fifth, I was beyond confident. In my mind, I was the Black Daniel Boone. I plotted my point and moseyed down another steep grade. One way to navigate foreign terrain is to track power lines, and I could see that one of those lines in the distance lead directly to my fifth and final point. I hustled down country, tracked the line, turned my conscious mind off, and started dreaming ahead. I knew I was going to rock the final exam, that 40-mile and land navigation I didn't even get to attempt last time because I busted my ankle 2 days before. I considered my graduation a foregone conclusion, and after that, I would be running and gunning in an elite unit again. As I visualized it, it became all the more real, and my imagination took me far away from the Appalachian Mountains. The thing about following the power supply is you would better make damn sure you are on the right line. According to my training, I was supposed to be constantly checking my map, so if I made a misstep, I could readjust and head in the right direction without losing too much time. But I was so overconfident I forgot to do that, and I didn't chart backstops either. By the time I woke from Fantasyland, I was way off course and almost out of bounds. I went into panic mode, found my location on the map, humped it to the right power line, sprinted to the top of the mountain, and kept running all the way to my fifth point. I still had 90 minutes until drop dead time, but when I got close to the next Humvee, I saw another guy heading back toward me. Where you headed? I asked as I jogged over. I am off to my sixth point, he said. Shit, there is not 5 points today. Nah, there is six today, brother. I checked my watch. I had a little over 40 minutes before they called time. I reached the Humvee, took down the coordinates for checkpoint 6 and studied the map. Thanks to my fuck up, I had two clear options. I could play by the rules and miss drop that time, or I could break the rules, use the roads at my disposal, and give myself a chance. The one thing on my side was that in special operations, they prize a thinking shooter, a soldier willing to do what it takes to meet an objective. All I could do was hope they would have mercy on me. I plotted the best possible route and took the fuck off. I skirted the woods, used the roads, and whenever I heard a truck rumbling in the near distance, I took cover. A half hour later, at the crest of yet another mountain, I could see the sixth point, our finish line. According to my watch, I have 5 minutes left. I flew downhill, sprinting all out, and made a drop dead by 1 minute. As I caught my breath, our crew was divided and loaded into the covered beds of two separate Humvees. At first glance, my group of guys looked pretty squared away, but given when and where I received my sixth point, every cadre in the place had to know I had skirted protocol. I didn't know what to think. Was I still in or asked out? As Delta selection, one way to be sure you are out is if you feel speed bumps after a day's work. Speed bumps mean you are back at the base and you are heading home early. That day when we felt that first one jar us out of our hopes and dreams, some guys started cursing, others had tears in their eyes. I just shook my head. Goggins, what the fuck are you doing here? One guy asked. He was shocked to see me sitting alongside him, but I was resigned to my reality because I had been daydreaming about graduating Delta training and being a part of the force when I hadn't even finished selection. I didn't do what they told me to do. I said I fucking deserves to go home. Bullshit, you are one of the best guys out here. They are making a huge mistake. I appreciated his outrage. I expected to make it too, but I could not be upset by their decision. Delta Brass were not looking for men who could pass a class with a C, B plus, or even an A minus effort. They only accepted A plus students, and if you fucked up and delivered a performance that was below your capability, they sent you packing. Shit, if you daydream for a split second on the battlefield, that could mean your life and the life of one of your brothers. I understood that. No, it was my mistake. I said I got this far by staying focused and delivering my best, and I am going home because I lost focus. It was time to go back to being a SEAL. For the next 2 years, I based in Honolulu as part of a clandestine transport unit called STV for SEAL delivery vehicles. Operation Red Wings is the best known SDV mission, and you only heard about it because it was such a big news. Most SDV work happens in the shadows and well out of sight. I fit in well over there, and it was great to be back operating again. I lived in Fort Island with a view of Pearl Harbor right out my living room window. Kate and I had split up, so now I was really living that Spartan life and still waking up at 5 a.m. to run into work. I had two routes, an 8 miler and a 10 miler, but no matter which I took, my body didn't react too well. After only a few miles, I had feel intense neck pain and dizzy spells. There were several times during my runs that I would have to sit down due to vertigo. For years, I had harbored a suspicion that we all had a limit on the miles we could run before a full body breakdown, and I wondered if I was closing in on mine. My body had never felt so tight. I had a knot on the base of my skull that I first noticed after graduating, but a decade later it was double in size. I had knots above my hip flexors too. I went to the doctor to get everything checked out, but they were not even tumors, much less malignant. When the doctors cleared me of moral danger, I realized I would have to live with them and try to forget about long distance running for a while. When an activity or exercise that you have always relied on gets taken away from you, like running was for me, it's easy to get stuck in a mental rut and stop doing any exercise at all. But I did not have a quitter's mentality. I gravitated toward the pull up bar and replicated the workouts I used to do with sludge. It was an exercise that allowed me to push myself and did not make me dizzy because I could take a break between sets. After a while, I googled around to see if there was a pull up record within reach. That's when I read about Stephen Highland's many pull up records, including the 24-hour record of 4020. At the time, I was known as an ultra runner and I didn't want to be known for just one thing. Who does? Nobody thought of me as an all around athlete, and this record could change that dynamic. How many people are capable of running 100, 150, even 200 miles and also knocking out over 4,000 pull ups in a day? I called the Special Operations Warrior Foundation and asked if I could help raise a bit more money. They were thrilled, and next day, thing I knew, a contact of mine used her networking skills to book me on the Devon Today show. Thank you. That's it for the day.